Good morning and welcome to the Men's Leadership Network. Welcome to the final week of our fall series. It's certainly fall. It's dark when we wake up and it's dark when we get home. So thank you for getting out of bed and coming and joining us this morning. I want to welcome all the satellite campuses, all the groups meeting around Nashville today. The group in Cool Springs meeting at Bricks, in Nolensville at Highway 55, and then of course in downtown Nashville at Flavor Catering. Welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us. I want to remind everybody that we'll go for about 35 minutes, and then we'll have a time of questions. So if you have any questions while you're listening to the interview this morning, please get those into us. You can do that two ways. One is you can tweet those in, at leadership_net is the Twitter handle on that, or you can email them in at questions@mensleadershipnetwork.com. So we'll put a reminder up about halfway through. If you have any questions, please get those into us. Okay, let's get started. Williamson County is one of the fastest growing areas in the country and has been for the past decade. The county is a magnet for major corporations looking to relocate their headquarters, has one of the best performing school systems in the state, and is passionate about its commitment to parks and green spaces, making this an attractive place to work and live. Much of the vision for growing Williamson County while maintaining the down-home charm that we've all come to know and love can be traced back to Mayor Rogers Anderson, who has been Williamson County's mayor since 2002. A graduate of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, go Vols, Mayor Anderson is a veteran of the United States Air Force, having served in Africa and Vietnam. After being elected as county mayor in August of 2002, Rogers retired after 25 years in the private insurance sector. During his time in public service, Mayor Anderson has accumulated a long list of awards and achievements, too numerous to list here, but I'd argue that if you asked him today what he's most proud of, he'd likely look past his successful career altogether and tell you about his 5 children: Ryan, Travis, Laura, Wes, Russ, and then 9 grandchildren. Please welcome me in joining, please join me in welcoming our mayor, Rogers Anderson.
Woohoo, yeah.
Thank you.
Rogers. This is great.
Great to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. Tell us a little bit about your family, but then also your faith journey over the years.
Well, let's start first with the faith journey. I was very fortunate to have in my life the best parents that a person could ever want. I was raised in a very Christian, godly family that there wasn't a lot of democracy. Oftentimes, Mom was thumping us on the head in church to sit down, be quiet. But that paved the way. I came from a working class family. Mom was home, stayed at home until the younger siblings finished. Dad worked the shift work for his entire life. And work was part of growing up, that there were chores. There were things you were expected to do around the house, out in the sheds, out in the fields, and you could participate in the things you wanted to. Sports was one of those for most boys, but it was after the fact. You had to still do your work, and so it was a wonderful journey that set the theme for most of us, men my age. All they could think about someday in life when I get older, I'm not going to raise a garden, I'm not going to have to do anything in the agricultural side, and the first thing you did after you get married is raise a garden, play around with the tomatoes. And so that's my hobby, and it has been. I was fortunate when I finished high school. My period of time, the draft was around, and anyway, wound up in the Air Force, as you heard, stayed in Vietnam, stayed in Africa for a period of time, got out, and wanted to get serious about life. Went to school at the University of Tennessee. Went simultaneously. Very few people realize, but I went to one of the very first students at a community college outside of East Tennessee, simultaneously going to UT. So through the GI Bill and working, finished, married, had a family, got involved in the insurance industry, loved that side, the commercial side of it. Moved to Franklin in 1980 to relocate my firm here, and then the rest of it's history. Got involved. Had children, got 9 grandbabies. That's all I talk about now. I don't introduce my children when the grandchildren are around. They're out of luck. They just got to get used to it. It's all about grandchildren, and I'm fortunate that 6 of the grandkids out of the 9 live here in Middle Tennessee.
Wow, what a blessing to have your family that close. Well, so how did you get into politics?
So in the mid-80s, came home from a business trip, been traveling, and found out that the public school system, and it was in the Grassland area, Didn't have enough money for construction paper and things like that. Kind of got involved. You know, during that period of time, you're coaching the ball teams and going to the PTAs and getting in the dunking booth, and all the dads are getting around and having a good time. But it really dawned on me that we were having real struggles with our public education. And my oldest child was approaching that middle grades of elementary, and began to think, is this really what I want? Do I need to be looking at private schools? There's some great private schools, BA at that time, BGA, and a few others. And I thought, well, let me check into this. And come to find out, the public schools were not what they should have been, in my opinion. And so, like I have been raised to do, if you don't like it, you need to get involved and try to get those things corrected and fixed. And fortunately, there were other men and women at the community at the time, and through a lot of hard work and effort and the community, we began to able to see and focus our attention in Williamson County on public education, that it drives so many of the things that we do.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I got involved. In 1986, so it's been a little over 30 years of being involved in the political arena.
Wow. So when did you became mayor in 92?
In 2002.
2002. So you started working in the school system, and you just seeing that you can make a difference there.
Well, in all communities and across the state of Tennessee, you have your elected body in your whole county. They're called county commissioners. They vary by numbers. We happen to have 24, still have 24. I became one of those 24 in 1986. As time went on, and I began to think, you know, right after the turn of the century, that I think I would like to become mayor, so I just retired, sold my business, whatever you want to do, got into mayoring, and I've been at it ever since. So for 30 years, worked with a lot of great men and women, other mayors, city mayors, other elected officials, community leaders such as yourself and what's in the audience here today, just to kind of craft and develop. Government doesn't create jobs. Government kind of herds a lot of the programs around, and hopefully people sign on and buy into them, and then develop what we've been able to have here. You've got a couple of members here sitting in the audience that I know that have gone from the agriculture side. We have one of the best 4-H's all the way into the economic development side that these men helped to craft and develop. And we've changed a lot of things, but really and truly the bottom line in our county, it's the people here that really take an interest and fall in love with this and want to call it home.
I love that. Well, Roger, you've done a great job as being mayor. I mean, I just want to applaud you. How have you led so effectively? I mean, you have made a huge impact and a huge difference. Well,
first of all, I mean, I realize where I'm sitting, so it's real easy to say this. I was blessed to have godly parents, and so grew up with that. I firmly believe that I'm here as a byproduct of this is what God wants me to do. You know, I'm an old, gray-headed old man now, so it's a lot easier for you to say that and not worry about the repercussions. When you're younger, you're trying to get your career. Sometimes you tippy-toe around those issues, but it's what's in your heart that really counts. And I was blessed with that. So just about every day, not every day, sometimes I fall down just like the rest of us. I try to start the day with reading the good book or something along the lines that makes reference on the good book. So currently I've been trying to read and understand Nehemiah, and it's a difficult little journey rereading some of that old history. But I guess my preference of saying what's been successful is working hard, giving back to, finding good men and women in your community that will take a program and trust in that, and then get out of the way that they'll do it. And if they don't do it, make changes as necessary. There's none of us that have all the answers. And so you find all those pieces of the puzzle to fit together, and your community will come around. Now, you're critiqued, you're looked at, but deep down, you got to have a sense of purpose, and that purpose for me is that we're just here a short time. Make the best of it you can. Try to make it a better place, and say your prayers and realize that you're human. You're going to make mistakes, and the good thing about it, Of course, again, there are probably people that don't always appreciate those views, but I felt like that when Jesus walked on earth, he was perfect. I don't believe there's anybody else.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yeah. So all of us have some area of leadership, right?
Sure.
And whether it's in our homes or in our businesses or in our community, what do you think are the main qualities of a good public servant? What are those qualities of leadership that you think every leader or a public servant should have?
Humility. Personal characters such as you need to have a sense of laughter. You really need to understand that it's okay to take time out and have quiet time. It's okay. I think it's important that we all have a period of time. My quiet time is I love gardening. That's seasonal, of course, but every day I try to walk 2.5, 3 miles, and that's my time to turn the phone off and get away from the world and try to focus on what's some personal things you need to work on, but also your job and what you're attempting to do. I think you have to have, it's very difficult, or it has been for me over the years, to find that male person that you can share with. And I think our churches and leaders like yourself that you can share. I just recently heard you and several of your members are going over to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful time for you to get to know other people. And that is very important as you develop your self-wellness and your self-being. Other than the good Lord, my family is the number one objective. And even though I don't get to see them every day, but I talk to them almost on a weekly basis. And so there's a lot of factors that go into developing ones, but I don't think, and I don't think that the spots on the dog fall very far. They'll turn gray, but they're going to be there until that dog passes away. And I think most of us will make mistakes, we err, but for the most part, surround yourself with good people, good godly men and women. I don't have to have the same faith, but have the understanding that we're all trying to get to heaven.
That's good. Well, being in politics, I've got to ask you, right now we're looking at this presidential election in our country, and it's so confusing for so many, and I think we look at two candidates, and for all of us, as a country, we're worried. And what do you see from a political side as you look at the general election, and what advice would you give us?
Well, today's Thursday the 19th, I believe. Is that right, or is it the 20th?
20th, yeah.
Last night, the third and final debate was on television, and between watching the debate and watching the baseball game, I probably enjoyed the Chicago Cubs game a lot more. I realize in our country, let me back up. There was 3 grand divisions in the system that we have here in the United States. You have the judicial, you have the legislative, and you have the executive. Whether you're talking at the presidential side up in Washington, D.C., or you're talking here in Franklin, Tennessee, those exist. And it's imperative that we all understand there's an importance our forefathers put together for this country or this county to perform and to exist for the long term. For me, this presidential election is not about just the man or the woman, but it's about who are you going to nominate for the Supreme Court? Who's going to govern our land? Who's going to sanctify those laws that come up through the lower courts and make it to the Supreme Court? How is that going to affect the next 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years of our quality of life issues that we deal with? There have been Supreme Court rulings that I totally disagree with, 100%. But our system that's the law. It's had the opportunity to meet a couple of your members this morning. One of them was talking about basketball and football and all the sports that we talk about. In some sports, if the ball or the foot touches the line, it's out. Other sports, if it touches the line, it's okay. Those are the rules. Those are the fundamental principles that we have developed here in our country. Just like the Bible's got rules and regulations, you have the freedom to go outside that. God's going to let us do that, just like the court systems are. But there are consequences for that. So to me, the presidential election in this particular cycle is who's going to lead us into the next generations from the legal side. I think the quality and the character of an individual is paramount. I'm not really pleased with either one of those top two, and there are many candidates running for president of the United States. Not real sure what the total numbers are, but not every presidential candidate that's on there will be in every state. So in some states they may have as many 8 or 10 men or women running. But the top two that are getting the attention, the top two that are generating this interest, the top two that are having the dialogue back and forth, has caused us all to sit back and really be concerned. If you're a Republican, you're concerned about some of the dialogues that's coming out of Mr. Trump's mouth, and if you're a Democrat, you're concerned about some of the dialogues and some of the things that are coming out of Hillary Clinton's mouth. But at the end of the day, you've got to remember, in my opinion, you need to vote. You have that responsibility. You should take it very seriously, and you should go to the polls and vote. You should, if you're not registered, it's too late for this election, but in our county, it's very possible we'll have 70% of the electoral go out and vote. Yesterday morning, early, I was heading out to Nashville. There was a line in our administrative complex with people already lined up to vote. I'm sure from both candidates. I'm sure for several of the candidates. But they're doing their civic job. They're doing what's important. I think also it's important to remember at the end of the day, the good Lord's in charge of this world. And I may not like the outcome, but I do think it's your responsibility. It's okay to disagree with me. It's okay for us as members. I'm not a minister. It's okay for us to sit in the audience as you're preaching and talking, to differ with you, but let's dig down into it and find out what the differences really are. And I'm afraid the solidity of our leaders today is not the way that I like to see our men and women. Let's just put the personal things on the back burner. Let's talk about the issues. How is it going to affect our country? How is it going to affect this area? Interesting to me this morning, looking at the poll returns and reading all the things you do. In Tennessee, on this particular station, well over 75% thought that Trump won. You go to the larger networks outside of this state, and over 75% thought Miss Clinton won. So it's how you value things. It's how you see the answers to the question, and how we demonstrate to others how we treat others. I've been a large component over the last 20, 25 years that I think a lot of this had started back in the 80s when we began to see athletes. I was a basketball coach for many years, and there was a period of time that it wasn't about getting into the end zone in football and doing White Shoes Johnson, I think that would Billy, whatever his name was, would do the dance when he scored a touchdown. In my age and generation, the coach would have had you sitting on the bench and corrected you, because this isn't an individual sport, it's a team sport. And I've noticed in the sports arena, there's a lot about, look what I've done, but the men and women in football that block up front, you know, they're now running to the end zone to take the ball to spike it. And there was a period of time it was about us collectively winning this game, not as an individual sport. You always had super athletes. I've been fortunate to see a lot of those men and women, but at the end of the day, it was about individual. Today, it's about individual accomplishments. And I still like the team concept. So how do I relate that back to sports? The men and women that are chosen as President of the United States, the best country in the world, the country of the free, the country that supplies so many of the other things for our other third world countries, it's just one element of that. You still got Congress. You still got other men and women that got to give their blessings and sanctions and votes to get all that. Not anything different here in Williamson County. But if you've got good leaders at the top, if you're willing to try to go through that process, then good things happen. And we should all be praying for our country.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we have a call as Christ followers to be praying for our leaders and lifting them up. In all your years in politics and looking back, have you ever seen an election that seems this divisive?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. Yesterday, one day this week, I was reminded of 25 years ago in the ministry, how several of our key leaders throughout the United States were on the front page of the paper because of their activities, and they weren't good activities. And that taints your industry, that taints your profession, just like it does mine. When people's personal activities and their character don't fulfill what all of us expect, we kind of turn sour on that person or that profession. And I think we're seeing a lot of it in the political arena. No, I've never seen the kind of personal attacks. None of us are perfect. None of the men and women that go up to Washington, Nashville, or Williamson County have got a squeaky clean track record. But I really wish during the debate they'd talk about the issues. How are you going to make our country better? How are you going to address some of the critical issues in our society that will make us better? On the other side, as I've heard people talk, maybe we're getting what we asked for. Maybe we wanted this change. Maybe we wanted these things that we wanted. And so God may say, here it is. I don't know that. I don't judge you, and I don't judge anyone else. But I am concerned for the next generation. But I think all good will come out of this. And the good Lord's in charge of it. And so we've got our job and role to do. So I'm going to support that.
Yeah. What do you think are the biggest issues we should be listening for?
Well, I've talked about one. I think the Supreme Court. That's critical mass. That's the way our country works, the laws. I think other things that, how are we going to deal with all of the conflict in the world? I don't know that it's any greater than it was 50 years ago. Maybe the social media, the technology, that something happens is instantly put out to people. We live in a world, when I was overseas in Vietnam and Africa, the way I communicated back home was snail mail or through a ham operator. That was it. Today, it's instant. So I do think the things that are happening in our third world, our job markets, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in China, whether it's in North Korea. North Korea concerns me more than from a national security than any other country. But maybe I should be more concerned with what's happening in the fighting that is going on in some of the provinces today. But long term, the great military powers that build up have a tendency sometimes to want to exercise that power in a way that can be very dangerous. So from a standpoint of your question, what should we be concerned about? What can we do? We do need to pray. And I think God does answer those prayers. But by the same time, we have to be prepared and don't let our guard down. The national security is very important in our country, just like it is here in our county.
So what do you see, Mayor, like as the biggest ramifications of the election? You got these two candidates, depending on, which one wins. What do you think is the kind of projection that you see from there?
Trump wins. I think you probably see more changes. I think if Miss Clinton wins, I think you see more of the same administration thinking going on, because they're Democrats and Republicans. It's just the philosophy of it. But again, they've got to get through Congress. I think the beautiful thing when you look about a lot of this is that there are communities such as Williamson County, we're not the only one, that have carved out kind of a niche in our community, in our state, that a lot of the other people are trying to get to. It's not because of me, but it's because of all these people in our community. We've coupled a strong public education that people want more for their children, Jeff. Couple that with good jobs, good paying jobs, not just the $8 and $10 wages, which you cannot live in this county. You just can't do that. This is probably the most giving community I've ever seen. Back to your churches, back to your community, from Habitat to CASA to all of the activities that go on. I've just never been involved with a community that you can just pick up the phone and call them and somebody will come to your aid. We have low crime in our community. Not crime less, we have low crime. But we do have some things going on in our community that cause us great concern. So I'm convinced that in this community and in this country, there are other counties and cities just like us trying to etch out a living, trying to provide a community that people want to live in and be a part of. They don't know the mayor of Williamson County. 50% of the people don't even know what a mayor does. They think he does, and they certainly don't know who I am. I acknowledge that. But I'm just one little servant of God to make it a better place, just like you are. If you go up into other parts of the county, you might run into some people that know you, but the vast majority of the folks don't know the good work that you're doing, teaching and educating and directing and pushing the next generation through. Accept that and go on with it. And so I really do believe the outcome of the country is very paramount. National defense, policy setting, that does trickle down here. But your community can still be a community that shines, that other people want to move in here. Matt Largent and I were talking to you. 49% of the people that live in Williamson County today were not born in this state. But yet I met a man coming in here that's born and raised here. But that's a small percentage of the people. So the growth issues that come, they come with a heavy price tag. But so far, for the last 25 or 30 years, this community has responded with good men and women, all walks of life, that have stepped up and said, we want this community to be the best, in spite of what's happening in Washington. They have a lot of influence over us, but they don't control us.
So what do you think as you look, and this is Men's Leadership Network, what do we learn about leadership from watching this election?
When I look at all of the men and women that have run for president of the United States, where they've made it to this far along, there's only a few still left standing up. We should all be thankful that those men and women have pushed us to that next point. They've challenged us. They're all leaders in their own respective area. Most of those men and women were leaders because of what they have done. They're just not stepping out and say, I want to be president of the United States. I'm sure there are certain men and women like that. But today's leaders are totally different than when Eisenhower was around. The military leaders in that generation from the 30s and 40s and certainly in the 50s, the MacArthurs, those strong men that were leaders in the military. I suspect, though, there were men and women that were great leaders in the community, but they just didn't get that notoriety that our military leadership has gotten. As we have progressed, more modern technology, more things going on. The men and women nowadays are businessmen, career politicians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But all leadership is about not just results. Now, they would have you to believe in the business world that if you make a lot of money, you're a successful leader. But there are other elements, I believe, with all my heart, and I've been in the business world too. It's not about how many people you have to run over to make a buck. At the end of the day, let's also talk about who you are, how you got it, and are you comfortable with that? And if the good Lord asks the question, can you answer him and say, yes, I've done the best that I can, and I've done it in the right way.
That's strong.
Well, and we're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a bumper sticker I saw many, many years ago. I'm not perfect, I'm just a Christian. And Jesus crawled upon the cross and died for me. He arose 3 or 4 days later, and guess what? That's what it's all about. I can get forgiven.
Wow. So, Mayor, give us a couple of takeaways for being leaders in our community, from being leaders in our country.
Get involved.
Okay.
Get involved.
How would you do that? What would you say?
Depending on what level you are in your community, you can be that mom that's engaged with her teacher. You could be that dad that could help your community softball team, not just show up for the game, but you could be involved. You could help coach. You could help line the field. There are so many ways that you can become involved in the community to make it successful. Writing a check is the easiest thing. Getting involved with your children. Taking our children, for me, working, being around my grandchildren to see how they should act. I can't raise them. My children are going to raise them. And I'm going to spoil them, by the way. And I intend to spoil my children, grandchildren. But I think all of us can be involved, whether it's in, I know Larry's here, in the 4-H area. Our children need to know that side of the work. Learn to get your hands dirty with your children. But other things you can do in your community, if you really have a calling, it's to get into the political side, go for it. State your position, why you want it, and get busy, and you can make a difference. You can change things if they're not good or you don't think they're good. In your churches, there are many things you can do. There was a gentleman here in the ministry, just retired 2 or 3 years ago. We call him Father Bob. I know you know him. You couldn't go to any hospital, any nursing home that his tracks and footprints had been there. Forget what he did out of the pulpit. Just how many people he comforted during that period of time. I think it's hard, all of us, to just put your arms around somebody and say, you know, I know you're hurting. We've experienced that, a lot of us, whether it's death, divorce, whether it's success, failure. A lot of us have experienced that along the way. And there was somebody that helped you along. So help that person along the way. I don't know if that really answered your question, but it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about all of us living cohesively in this world to try to make it a better place for our children and our grandchildren and for our community.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's why you see such a difference here in our community in Williamson County, and people do get involved, you know, and what you see in the churches. And you know, a lot of times people sit back and just, you know, you can text and tweet and do everything on social media, but man, when you get engaged, there's something that happens in the person's life you're serving, but also in your life, you know. So Mayor, what do you want your legacy to be?
I don't ever think about that. unfortunately, several years ago, I lost my wife. And at the funeral, there was a guy that presented me with a poem. It's called The Dash. You ever read The Dash? Mm-hmm. So the dash is the dates between when you're born and when you die. Mm. Your whole life is in that dash, as the poem says. All the positives, all the negatives, all the good, all the bad. Mm. And it's in that little bitty space that you put on your headstone. Mm. If you're fortunate enough in life to have your children still love you when you go out and your grandkids say, well, I really miss them, maybe that ought to be your legacy. Mm. But I never think about that. Mm. I'm confident when my time ends here on this earth, or my time ends as mayor, whatever time that is, that the next man or woman will step in, they'll make changes, and within months they'll say, I wonder why Mayor Anderson did it that way. That is the goofiest thing in the world for him to ever do. I know how life goes on. Mm-hmm. And I've even said that with the last mayor or two, mm-hmm. and they're good friends. Mm-hmm. So I don't dwell on legacies. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I think you are responsible for the actions that you have here on this earth, and I hope and pray that God always blesses this community, mm-hmm. and blesses men like you, mm-hmm. blesses our other congregations in our community, mm-hmm. Because we're all striving to worship here in our country, and that's a freedom. If there's one thing that concerns me, is that we have that freedom to continue to worship, and there's no guards posted outside these doors. That's, unfortunately, is changing in our society.
All right, I got one more question, then we're going to get some questions from everybody else.
Sure.
So how can we best pray for you and pray for our leaders in Washington as we think about the election? What do you think we should be praying?
So I learned a long time ago, when you can't totally answer that question, I always throw it back to the moderator. How would you ask us to pray?
I pray for you guys. Here's the way I pray for you. And I don't tell me if it's right, okay? I pray for wisdom because I think you guys have such a huge responsibility. I pray for boldness, that you guys would be able to make the moves. And I think in a political correct society, a lot of times we become hesitant in that. And I pray for character because I think, character is as much who you are as more than what you do. And I think there's little eyes that are watching you and all of our politicians. And so those are the three things that I pray. And I hope I'm praying correctly for you guys. But I just want you to know that I think it's important. And I appreciate your leadership. And I'm praying for that for our leaders in Washington.
So you said something that had been a long time since I thought about it. Wonder what Jesus prayed for his apostles. Wonder what the apostles have prayed for him. Maybe they didn't know, they couldn't understand what was really going on if my history, my teaching taught me right. And I think sometimes our prayers, and I do think those things you mentioned are very, very important. But I do believe God's going to answer those prayers one way or another. I don't know why he doesn't listen to me more often than he does, because I've got the answers for everything already figured out. You realize that's a joke.
Oh, yeah.
But I've been around long enough now to know that I can release it, I can pray, I can get it off my plate. And he says, just give it to me. It's yours. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't pop up somewhere, and that's when I have to remind him, I gave you that someplace else. Being a little humorous here, but I believe God has a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe God looks down and says, look, Rogers, I've already told you this isn't going to happen. Go on about your business, pray all you want. But the Bible tells us there were some people that caused God to rethink that. He didn't destroy everybody. All you got to do is find me a few people. And well, it was hard. He knew the answer. But just like in the beginning, he already had the master plan to have to send Jesus here. In the very beginning when he was creating the earth.
He did. did.
He did.
Yep.
He knew the answer. And there was a long period of time. I don't know how long that, in years, in light years. I don't know all that. But he knew Adam and Eve just couldn't walk through there and get it all done.
Well, I want you to know that I do pray for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we do. And we're thankful for you. So we've got time for a couple of questions, I think.
Yeah, it's been a busy morning. Twitter might be trending today. We've got a lot of activity. Here's the first one that came in.
Let me tell you who that came from.
Yeah, come on. What's the biggest threat to economic development in Williamson County? I don't know if it's who you think it is, but it's close. They might be at the same table.
What's the biggest threat to
economic development?
Economic development in Williamson County. You know, we've been very, very blessed with a lot of great companies that have moved in here.
Let me switch with you. Get this for you. There you go.
We've been very blessed in Williamson County. I would suspect that over the last 15 or 20, 30, 25 years, because you got to remember, Williamson County in the early 90s didn't even have the mall.
Yeah.
And so in 91, 92, the mall came to town. And there was no place for you to have a meeting at all. So the city and the county went together and helped work with the Marriott to create the convention center. So it is looking ahead, trying to understand. When Matt Largent was working for the state of Tennessee and he was running around, I call him a snotty-nosed little kid, he impressed me. And he was working at that time for Nashville, but he was representing trying to get Nissan here. Nissan was a bold move for us in those days. Through the avenue of the governor at that time, Governor Bredesen, and through the leadership at Nissan, they chose our community to come out of California long before they ever made the announcement. And we need other companies like that. We need other businesses, but let's not forget that the well over 20% plus of our workforce is made up of entrepreneurs that don't go to work at the government or Nissan. They work out of their homes. They work in their jobs. And so the biggest threat to any of us in the economic area is being able to provide the level of service and to continue in that for years to come down the pike for the next generations. And that's a challenge because all this growth creates this one issue that we're all concerned about. It's called traffic. And congestion. And how do we handle that? How do we pay for all the school buildings? How do we pay for these different services and still maintain a quality of life that we can all live in?
Yeah, that's a good one. Another question?
Yeah, we got another one here.
Here, let's switch with you. I'll be the reader. I'll be the carrier.
Okay, next question. What steps can each of us take to bring about a greater level of civility?
This one's easy. Pray every day.
Pray. What we talked about, right?
Well, and be tolerant of each of us. I may not agree with everything you say or do, but be tolerant of those men and women and how we answer the questions and how we try to govern. Governing is more important than politicians. How do you govern? How do you govern your family? How do you govern your church? How do you govern your community? And governance is so critical.
Wow. That's a good answer. I mean, it really is because, you bring it back to us, right? Instead of putting it on to somebody else and, hey, you're responsible. You brought that back to us. We have a responsibility there. So that's good. We got one more question right here. So I'm just going to ask it right here. We're going to put it up. You got it right there? We just had that one. All right. Who is someone in your life that has been a strong leadership mentor?
My dad. No question. Dad was not an educated man in the terms that we think of today. But he was such a wonderful example. He was the leader in our house. Now, quite frankly and honestly, I grew up thinking it was always Mom, because she just was there more. He was always working. But Dad was involved in the community, not the way I am. He was not a politician. He couldn't stand it. But he was always helping that neighbor, always working with somebody, always trying to figure out something. But he was also giving us that those leadership qualities that we were going to need later in life. My sister and I did not have a brother. But he was a man that believed that you could make mistakes, you need to be tolerant, and you need to be tolerant of other people. You need to be tolerant of, because I grew up on the other side of the tracks. We didn't have a silver spoon. We didn't have a lot of things. I didn't know that until I left home. But all the clothes that I wore had patches. We worked in the fields, tobacco fields, cornfields, the garden. We put up things, we froze things, we scrubbed the corn. I still do that today. I love it today, but back then I didn't. All my sister, all of her clothes were dresses that Mom made. So you had to be tolerant of others. The good part about it in the area that we lived in, that's kind of the way everybody else was. And boys were expected to do their work. And Mom had a theory that if you lingered around the house too long, you were just, let me find some more work for you. So boys got out. We hunted. We fished. We just played in the fields. But we didn't go back home until supper time because there was work waiting on us. So the leadership role for me was my mom and dad. And then along the way, there's been a lot of good men and women that have given me advice.
Yeah. Roger, thank you. So I want to pray for us. And man, I think you've been such a great encouragement, but also challenge to us. So let me pray. Father God, thank you for today. And God, I just thank you for Mary Anderson. I thank you, Father, for his life, for his journey, Father, for his family, for his kids and his grandkids. I thank you for his dad. And just hearing him say that the biggest leadership impact on him was his dad, and thinking about all of us in this room and all who are watching right now, whether it's a podcast or sitting in a different location, Father, many of us are dads. And God, we admit that sometimes it gets crazy in our lives and we get busy in our jobs and our careers, but help us not to forget that our biggest calling, that you have placed us to be the spiritual leader in our home and to love our families. And God, we don't get this time back. Father, our kids grow up fast, God, and one day we'll have grandkids. So Lord Jesus, I pray that we would embrace the moment. I pray that we would be the men that you've called us to be. And I pray that, God, we would leave a legacy for your name and for your glory. So I pray for our country. I pray for the leaders. I pray for our mayor and for our community, God. And just, Lord, use us in our day and our generation, Father, to further your kingdom. And it's in the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Amen. Wow. Thanks, Rogers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mayor Anderson. That's fantastic. Let's give Mayor Anderson a round of applause. Okay, that concludes the fall series of Men's Leadership Network. We're going to get going again next March for the spring series. We've got another good lineup of speakers, and we'll get those out to you guys over the holidays. I want to make a reminder that if you go to the mensleadershipnetwork.com website, we've got an archive of all of our past interviews, all of our past speakers, and the resources there. So fantastic content. If you need anything over the next couple months, or if there's something you're dealing with or peers dealing with, feel free to access those resources there. Also, sign up to follow us on Twitter or Instagram or for email updates, because we will be getting information out over the holidays, maybe some additional interviews that we do that we just send out as a podcast, but then also information about the spring. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys in March.